An alien fleet, poised to strike Earth, is suddenly thrown into chaos. A mysterious pulse disables all their advanced technology, plunging them into a state of panic. As their control slips away, they realize something more dangerous than humanity's. Primitive weapons may be at play. The Council's fleet, once a perfect model of precision and power, was now a tangled mess of static and confusion. Qatar stood at the front of the command deck, his eyes flicking between the malfunctioning consoles and the faces of his officers. The fleet had been in position for hours, waiting to execute the first strike on Earth. Yet something had gone wrong. "Status report," Qatar barked, his patience fraying. The deep hum of the command room should have felt like a steady rhythm, but now it was a chaotic cacophony of screeching alarms and distorted voices. A young officer turned to him, wide-eyed, her fingers trembling as she typed on the console. "Commander, all systems are failing. Navigation is down, communications are down. The fleet's tech, it's all dead, completely unresponsive. Explain yourself," Qatar growled, taking a step forward. He wasn't used to this. He was used to being in control, used to being the one who made the decisions, but now everything was slipping through his fingers. "We're not sure, sir," the officer stammered, "but something triggered a pulse. It came from Earth. The moment it hit, all systems started shutting down. Power grids, life support, shields, all of it. We've lost everything." Qatar's mind raced. A pulse from Earth? That didn't make sense. The humans, primitive, fragile, barely a threat, didn't possess the technology to do this. It was impossible. And yet here they were, trapped in space, powerless against an unseen force. "Get it back online," Qatar demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and rising fury. The officer's hands shook as she frantically typed, trying to reboot the systems, but nothing happened. The only sound in the room now was the static hum of the failing systems. A deep, unsettling silence spread across the room, and Qatar's mind shifted gears. The humans had done this. They had somehow unleashed something that even they couldn't control, and it was far worse than any weapon the Council had ever imagined. "Sir," another officer spoke, this one with a tremor in his voice. "The pulse, it wasn't just local. It spread through the entire fleet. It's affecting all our tech, not just the main ship. The entire armada is crippled." The weight of his words settled over Qatar like a heavy shroud. They had been so sure, so confident in their superiority. They had underestimated humanity, laughed at their primitive technology, but this was a level of force that no one had anticipated, not even the Council. "We need to find the source," Qatar said slowly, his mind beginning to form a new plan, one built on desperation. "If it came from Earth, then it must be linked to their technology. We need to neutralize it before they use it again." The officers looked at each other, clearly frightened. But Qatar's gaze hardened, the fire of determination lighting in his eyes. "Prepare the remaining functional vessels for a manual assault. We will take Earth without the tech. We've done it before and we'll do it again. But this time we need to strike at the heart of whatever is controlling that pulse." The fleet was in chaos, but it didn't matter. Qatar's pride refused to let him back down. He would not be the one to retreat, not from Earth, not from the humans. Back on Earth, the situation was far quieter, at least for now. Laura Carson sat at her desk, staring at the flickering lights in the lab. She hadn't slept for days, but it didn't matter. The pulse she had unleashed had done far more than she could have ever expected. She could feel it. The pulse had disabled the alien fleet, had given humanity the first real chance to fight back. But she wasn't celebrating. Not yet. There was still too much unknown. Her equipment was still in disarray, and she had no idea if the pulse had reached the far corners of the galaxy or if it was some kind of fluke. Worse, she wasn't even sure how long they had before the aliens figured out a way to counter it. Soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Raj stepped in, his face grim. "Laura, the pulse. It's not just affecting the fleet. It's affecting everything," he said, his voice low. "Power's flickering. Communications are spotty. If this spreads, we'll be back to square one, and the aliens will come, no matter what." Laura nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "I know, but it's the only shot we've got. We need to be ready. If they come here, we won't be able to fight them without more tech. We have to figure out how to control this pulse." "But how? How did we even create it?" Raj asked, his voice tinged with both awe and terror. Laura bit her lip. "It wasn't supposed to happen, but the pulse was an unintended side effect of the gravitational field experiment. Something in the frequency amplified it, something that the aliens have never encountered." Her mind was working overtime, racing with possibilities. She had no answers, but she knew one thing. Earth's fate now hung in the balance. The pulse had given them a moment of hope, but it also carried a tremendous danger. The aliens would figure it out. They had to. Qatar stood at the viewport of his command ship, staring out into the abyss. His fleet was crippled, their tech dead, and their advantage gone. The hum of the ship's failing engines was a grim reminder of the fragile line they were now walking. He clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the railing in front of him. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. His voice, low and deadly, reverberated through the command deck. Qatar's pride had been shattered, but that didn't matter now. What mattered was that humanity had just shown them what it could do, and the Council had no idea what it was up against, and that was before Earth even responded. The room was dark, lit only by the flickering light from malfunctioning screens, a grim reminder of the chaos unfolding outside. Qatar stood motionless at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of space. His mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. A pulse, a force seemingly from nowhere, had crippled his entire fleet. The ships that had once been the epitome of power were now nothing more than helpless hulks adrift in space, unable to communicate, unable to fight. "Status report," Qatar demanded, his voice echoing through the silent room. His command was sharp, but it was tinged with frustration, something he had never felt before. The aliens, who had once been the most dominant force in the galaxy, were now paralyzed by a single, unknown attack. The Council members, scattered across their respective ships, should have been celebrating their imminent victory. Instead, they were scrambling to understand the force that had just neutralized their power. "Commander Qatar," said Drax, his voice grave, his usual stoic demeanor cracked. "The pulse, it wasn't just a localized attack. It's affected everything. Every ship, every piece of technology. We are dead in the water. Power systems, weapons, shields, gone. We cannot even initiate a simple diagnostic scan. It's as if the pulse wiped everything clean." Qatar's fist clenched. This was impossible. The humans, the very species they had considered beneath them, had unleashed a force that crippled the heart of their war machine. But the Council had underestimated them. They had dismissed Earth as a mere curiosity, a planet teeming with primitive, fragile creatures. Now that ignorance had cost them everything. "How could this happen?" Qatar muttered, his voice low, almost to himself. The realization was hitting him like a physical blow. The humans had done this. They had triggered something that even the most advanced alien minds could not fathom. "It's a mystery," Drax replied, "but whatever it is, it's not over. If the humans have control of this pulse, they could—" "Enough," Qatar snapped, cutting him off. His eyes narrowed. "This is no time for hesitation. We will not let this anomaly defeat us. Find the source of this pulse. I want answers now." The crew scrambled, their motions frantic as they worked to salvage what was left of their broken technology. Every minute felt like an eternity. The once proud fleet, a symbol of dominance, was now a shadow of its former self. Their plans, their strategy, everything was in disarray, and Earth had shown them how fragile their might truly was. On Earth, the pulse's effects were just beginning to ripple across the planet's surface. Laura Carson had never felt so powerless. For weeks, she had worked tirelessly on her gravitational field experiment, convinced that her theory could revolutionize space travel. But now, the unintended consequences were clear. The pulse that had spread through space, disabling alien ships, had also set off a chain reaction on Earth. Systems were crashing, the power grids flickering, communications failing. The pulse had gone beyond anything she had ever imagined. "I didn't mean for this," she whispered, staring at the now dead screens in front of her. She could feel the weight of her mistake pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. What had she done? In her desire to push the boundaries of science, she had unwittingly triggered a galactic conflict. The pulse had destabilized the alien fleet. But what would the aliens do next? Would they retaliate? Would they wipe Earth from existence? Raj stood beside her, his face pale. "We need to do something, Laura. The aliens, they're coming, and we can't fight them without the tech. What's the plan?" Laura turned to him, her mind still spinning. She didn't have a plan. She didn't even know if there was a way to reverse the damage she had caused. But she had to try. The pulse was the key. She had to figure out how to control it, to turn it into their advantage. "We need to stabilize the pulse," Laura said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "If we can harness it, maybe we can use it against them. But we need to understand it first." Raj looked at her with skepticism. "And how do you suggest we do that, Laura? We don't even know where it came from. We don't even know how to stop it from spreading further." "I'm not sure," Laura admitted. "Laura, but we can't just sit here and wait for them to destroy us. We have to fight back." As the two of them stood there, trying to formulate a plan, the world outside continued to unravel. The power flickered once again, the hum of the generators growing louder and more erratic. The pulse wasn't just a simple glitch. It was a force, a weapon, or perhaps something even more dangerous. And it was in their hands now. Back in space, Qatar's fury had reached its peak. His officers worked frantically, but the results were the same. Nothing. The pulse had left them stranded, unable to make contact with the rest of the galaxy, unable to communicate with the Council. They were a fleet adrift, a fleet with no direction and no power. "Commander," one of the officers called out, breaking the silence. "We've located something, some kind of anomaly. It appears to be coming from Earth. It's not just a signal. It's a repeating pattern, almost like a pulse." Qatar interrupted, his heart skipping a beat. He stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the officer's display. "Show me." The officer quickly patched the data through to the main screen, and Qatar's eyes widened as the pattern of the pulse flickered on the screen. It was unmistakable. It was the same frequency, the same force that had crippled his fleet. "It came from there," Qatar said, his voice low and filled with a dark realization. "The humans. They didn't just trigger it. They're controlling it." Drax stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "Then they've found something we didn't even know existed. If they can harness that pulse, it will change everything." Qatar clenched his fists. "Then we must stop them before they fully understand it. If we wait too long, they will use it against us. This is no longer just about Earth. It's about the survival of our entire empire." Laura's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to make sense of the chaotic data streaming in. Every fiber of her being screamed that time was running out. The pulse had to be contained. They couldn't let it spread any further. "But how?" "Laura, listen to me," Raj said, his voice filled with urgency. "The aliens, if they figure out how to harness this pulse, they'll destroy us. We have to stop it now." "I know," Laura replied, her voice strained. "But we can't just stop it. We need to control it. We need to learn how to make it work for us." The clock was ticking. Every second they wasted brought them closer to total annihilation. Earth had made a move, one that had caught the galaxy's most powerful fleet completely off guard. But as much as the pulse had leveled the playing field, it also brought humanity closer to the brink of disaster. And as the alien fleet drifted in space, paralyzed by the force they couldn't comprehend, one thing became clear. The battle for the future of Earth was only just beginning. The silence in the command deck was suffocating. Qatar paced back and forth, his mind consumed by the chaos that had gripped his fleet. Every once in a while, the soft hum of the failing technology would break through the stillness, a cruel reminder of how far they had fallen. His once mighty fleet, composed of the most advanced ships in the galaxy, was now little more than a fleet of dead machines. Their weapons, their communications, their navigational systems, all were useless. A single pulse from Earth had undone centuries of advancement. "Commander, we've made contact with the rest of the fleet." Drax's voice broke through the tension, though his tone was anything but reassuring. "The damage is widespread. Our ships are scattered, unable to communicate or coordinate. We have no control." Qatar stopped pacing, his eyes flicking toward the screen, where the images of the scattered ships appeared, frozen in space. The once orderly formation was now a jumbled mess, each vessel adrift, incapable of following orders. His mind raced, but the anger was slow to boil to the surface. It had been hours since the pulse hit, and still the fleet was in turmoil. "Find out who did this," Qatar growled. "I want their location. This isn't just a glitch or an accident. Someone engineered this." Drax nodded, a stern expression on his face. "We've sent probes to Earth, but so far, we've detected nothing unusual, save for the pulse itself. The humans seem unaware of the extent of the damage they've caused. But the pulse, it's unique. It's something they should not have." Qatar's gaze hardened. "And that's the problem. If the humans are this advanced in something we can't even comprehend, then we've underestimated them more than I thought." "I've been running simulations," another officer spoke up, his voice barely audible. "The pulse is not random. It's calculated, and it's growing. It started as a localized event, but now it's spreading. It's starting to affect our entire sector. We can't just stop it. It's not just a weapon. It's a force of nature." Qatar turned toward the officer, his eyes narrowing. "A force of nature?" he scoffed. "What are you implying? The humans can't control something like that?" The officer hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted the data on his console. "We thought that too. But the more we study the pulse, the more we realize it's not just a simple attack. It's evolving. It's starting to manipulate the laws of physics around it. Gravity, electromagnetic fields, even time. It's bending them. And that means the humans have unlocked something we don't understand." Qatar clenched his fists. This was more than he could have ever imagined. The pulse wasn't just a weapon. It was a new kind of power, one that could shift the balance of the entire galaxy. And it had come from Earth, of all places. The humans were not just a threat. They were an unknown force, one that had the potential to rewrite the very rules of the universe. "We cannot sit here and wait for them to master this power," Qatar said, his voice low and filled with a dangerous edge. "We need to find a way to neutralize it before it spreads further." The officer nodded, though doubt flickered in his eyes. "We don't even know where to begin, Commander. We don't have the resources to combat something this advanced. And every time we try to recalibrate our systems, the pulse destabilizes them further." "Then we will have to go to Earth," Qatar declared. His words were final, resolute. "We can't wait for the humans to perfect whatever they've unleashed. We'll have to do it the old-fashioned way, on the ground." Drax raised an eyebrow. Surprised, "Commander, are you suggesting we land on Earth after everything that's happened?" Qatar's jaw tightened. "Yes, we've lost the ability to fight from space. If we can get to their planet, we may be able to find the source of this pulse. We need to get close to the humans to understand what they've done." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had all seen the damage caused by the pulse. But now, Qatar was suggesting they face whatever had triggered it up close. It was risky, it was dangerous, but it was the only option left. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Laura Carson's hands trembled as she stared at the data on her screen. She had been up for hours, piecing together fragments of information, trying to understand how the pulse had originated and how she might control it. The implications of what she had done weighed heavily on her, but there was no time for regret. The pulse wasn't just a phenomenon, it was the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. "We've triggered something bigger than us, Laura," Raj said, his voice quiet but heavy with fear. "The aliens, whatever they are, they'll come for us. They've already shown they can't control this, but they'll try. And when they do, we won't have the tech to stop them." "I know," Laura replied, her voice tight, "but the pulse, it's our only chance. If we can figure out how to control it, to harness it, we can turn the tables, we can fight back." Raji looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "You think we can control something we don't even understand? The aliens have fleets, weapons, tech far beyond anything we can dream of, and we've got this." He gestured toward the malfunctioning screens. "Barely enough to keep the lights on. We can't just give up," Laura said, her tone firm. "This pulse, it's not just a defense, it's an opportunity. We have to learn how to use it." The thought of facing the alien fleet terrified her, but deep down, she knew Raj was right. They had no weapons, no military. What they had was the pulsar, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to survive. As she began running new simulations, trying to map the pulse's growth and behavior, a sudden thought struck her. "What if they're trying to figure it out too?" she whispered. Raj looked at her, confusion written across his face. "What do you mean?" "If they're tracking it, studying it, they may be trying to figure out how to stop it. What if they come here to try and take control of it?" Laura said, her voice growing more urgent. "What if they think it's a threat?" Raj's eyes widened. "So they'll come for the source?" "Yes," Laura said, her heart pounding. "And if they do, we need to be ready. We need to control the pulse. Before they figure it out, the pulse was their weapon, but it was also their greatest risk, and the more they learned about it, the more they realized just how little they truly understood." The ship's hull vibrated slightly under Qatar's boots as he stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the dark expanse of space. The gravity of the situation had never been more apparent. Earth had shown them a force beyond their understanding. A pulse, a weapon or something more, strong enough to incapacitate an entire fleet. But that was only the beginning. The aliens had underestimated humanity, and they were now rushing to rectify their mistake. Qatar's thoughts raced. The decision to send a landing party to Earth hadn't been easy, but it was necessary. They were no longer fighting a conventional war. They were facing an unknown enemy, armed with something they could not control. Their fleet, once the most advanced in the galaxy, was now a series of broken ships, floating helplessly in space. But Qatar refused to concede defeat. There had to be a way to regain the upper hand. They would find the pulse's origin, and they would crush it. "Commander," Drax's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "We're ready to deploy. We've isolated a small team for the landing. We'll move quickly, take control of the pulse, and disable it before it grows any stronger." Qatar turned to face him. Drax's words were confident, but Qatar could see the worry beneath them. There was no guarantee this mission would succeed, but they had no choice. "Prepare the landing, craft. We leave in 15 minutes. As Drax moved to give the orders, Qatar's mind wandered again to Earth. The planet that had once been considered an insignificant speck in the galaxy was now a symbol of potential devastation, and it was up to him to stop it. Back on Earth, Laura Carson sat in front of her terminal, her fingers dancing across the keys in a desperate attempt to regain control of the pulse that had come from her own experiment, the pulse that had, in turn, triggered this catastrophic chain of events. She had caused this, but she wasn't going to let it destroy her world. The pulse was unpredictable. She'd seen it grow, felt it shift in strange ways, defying all logic and reason. But if the aliens were coming, and they were, they wouldn't stop until they had taken control. The pulse had to be their weapon now, and Laura had to figure out how to use it to protect humanity. "Laura, we're running out of time," Raj said, his voice tinged with anxiety as he hovered over her shoulder. "If they find us, we're done. We can't fight them off with this thing." Laura looked up at him, her face grim. "I know. But this pulse is our only chance. We need to control it, harness it. If we don't, we'll be wiped out before we even understand what's coming." Just then, a sudden alarm echoed through the lab. The screen flickered, displaying a red warning sign. Raj's eyes widened. "They're here." Laura felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. The aliens were on their way, and she didn't have the answers. Not yet. The world outside felt like it was crumbling, and in the distance, the sound of engines grew louder. Time was up. Qatar's ship descended toward Earth's atmosphere, the rocky terrain of the planet becoming clearer with each passing moment. His heart pounded in his chest. They were coming for the pulse, and once they found it, there would be no turning back. As the ship broke through the clouds, Qatar steeled himself for what lay ahead. He had no idea what they would encounter on the ground, but if they failed, Earth would become the most dangerous place in the galaxy.